Today on the Fearless Future podcast, we are going to be chatting with Executive Director Mark Cavaliere of Guiding Star Southwest. We are so proud to have this arm of our organization in the Texas and New Mexico area, serving women there. And so today on the podcast, we're going to hear his incredible story of overcoming the community, some challenges in their specific community, what it was like to begin Guiding Star Southwest, and the impact it's having on women in the borderland area. That's what's coming up today on the Fearless Future podcast.
Welcome to the Fearless Future podcast, where your hosts Lisa Canning and Leah Jacobson will explore what the world would look like if women didn't fear pregnancy. Through education, community, and healthcare solutions, Guiding Star Project strives to make this a reality at our physical centers across the United States. Join us.
Mark Cavaliere, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful, better than I deserve. Thank you for having me.
Oh, that's such a nice response. Such an eloquent response. Mark, for anyone who might not know you and your work, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. I'm humbled to be with you. Yes, my name is Mark Cavaliere, and I started off about 10 years ago, almost exactly, and got started in initially pro-life work in response to an abortion facility opening in our community of Las Cruces, and the journey over the past 10 years through that, alongside also the path of my wife and her experiences of women's healthcare and childbirth and pregnancy loss and fertility and just all of that. It has all kind of merged very beautifully into what I really feel is a passion and a conviction with the Guiding Star Project. And so it's really fun to see where it's gotten us.
You are our only male executive director. You are the one male in a very female dominant community. And we are very, very grateful for that. What got you started in the pro-life community in the very beginning? Like, were you always an advocate? Were you always involved? What was like that beginning impetus for getting involved?
Sure. So I started off again. It was about 10 years ago, and I was very, very political, like militantly. Like I was that guy that even if you agreed with me, you were like blocking me on Facebook because I was just overwhelming everybody with just I was one of those like keyboard activists, keyboard warriors, and frankly, it was unhealthy. My wife put up with me diligently during that time. And so, I at the time I was very pro-life, but it was always very focused on, the who do we need to vote for, what legislation needs to be passed, things like that, which is, there's a space and a need for that. But at some point, especially in the state of New Mexico, which still to this day has unrestricted abortion up to the moment of delivery for any reason, including even now tax-funded abortions. Obviously, I was, it was a challenge in this particular state, and it seemed like I got more and more involved. I got into the state central committee for the one of the parties in New Mexico, and it just seemed the deeper I got into all of this, the more it seemed like a lot of time and energy and cost with not a lot of fruit, not a lot of outcome. And it got to a point where I was just kind of feeling, very, very frustrated, and I didn't know what to do. And so I actually kind of hit a point where I was just like, you know what, I kind of swung the other direction. I kind of became apolitical for a little while. I was just like, it's not working after all this time and effort. And then we got the news, and I was almost at this point of despair of like what to do now. And then we heard about an abortion facility opening in our community of Las Cruces. And that was the first time I realized that this isn't just a ballot issue. This is something that's actually affecting the local women and children in our community. And, what can we do about it? And I was invited to a living room, a woman's living room in the community, who was putting together with the help of the El Paso community, a 40 Days for Life campaign. And I had such tunnel vision in the political route that I didn't know anything about the pro-life movement. I didn't know anything about 40 Days for Life or pregnancy centers or anything of that nature. And so we watched this video of David B. Wright, and I remember hearing about, you know, uh, women changing their mind who formerly felt like they had no choice but abortion, and lives being saved, and abortion workers converting, and even abortion facilities closing, all in spite of the laws and the politics. And there's now been, I can never keep up with the numbers, but there's been, hundreds of abortion facilities now closed following these 40 Days for Life prayer vigils. And the state, interestingly, the state that has had the highest number of closures, of 155 abortion facilities closing, the state that's had the highest number of closures is California. And which is interesting because they're very, hostile towards pro-life communities and efforts, and very supportive of abortion. But what I realize is in that state, people there, the pro-life community doesn't have any illusion that this is something that's going to be solved through their government and so they get out, they get active, they reach out, they know that it's up to them, and the church is much more activated there, putting their faith in action, because sometimes in other states we have this idea, and that's what I realized I had been doing. I had been putting all my emphasis on petitioning Caesar, if you will, to help my neighbor for me. And that's not what we're called to do. And we have to get out, and we have to get out of our comfort zone. We got to get our knees on the ground, and we got to help our neighbor. And I firmly believe that I don't care what the abortion laws are, frankly. I think, we could have abortion up to delivery, so ratified in the Constitution. We don't want that, obviously. But in spite of that, my point is, if the church actually lived our faith as if it was true, which we know that it is, but we don't always live like that. If we actually got out and did what we were called to do, then I don't think we would see it. I don't think it'd be an issue. And so we did this in Las Cruces. We got started, and we had our first 40 Days for Life campaign. And I remember the opening of this facility was delayed by almost exactly 40 days. And we just saw momentum and hundreds of people coming out in prayer. And so after that first vigil, we realized, 40 Days for Life is fantastic, and it's a great start to get people involved. But even between the two fall and spring campaigns, there's still 285 other days of the year. And if this facility is operating full-time, fully staffed, fully funded to harm women and children in our community, how can we only respond part-time? And interestingly too, I remember it started even then in the early, in that beginning part of my journey. I remember thinking, this facility was called Whole Woman's Health. And I was like, what, how, that doesn't seem like this is leaving women feeling whole. It doesn't feel like this is actually comprehensive. They're offering one service and one service only, which is actually about destroying, really the essence of womanhood, which is to bear children. And so even from the beginning, I just remember even thinking, even in their name, you think of Planned Parenthood, these other facilities that we're up against, Women's Reproductive Services, a Full Circle Health Center. There's always this kind of implication that they're trying to imply that we offer full circle, whole women's health, and yet all of them do pretty much just abortion. Sometimes they'll do contraception services, which still is about just suppressing these normal, healthy functions of your body. And so I started just kind of, realizing there's a deeper issue here. And admittedly, like a lot of people who get involved in pro-life, initially it's kind of in response to this injustice that here's a new little innocent life, and that life is being taken. But as I started really getting deeper to it, I was like, they're not choosing to be here. The mother is the one who's coming here. What is driving women to feel that they have no other option? And I remember at some point around the same time, seeing this initial webpage that was out there 10 years ago for this vision of these guiding star centers. And I remember seeing that they kind of had this little sketch up of a possible building and all these different rooms and kind of 4 different quadrants, and there was like the pregnancy help side, which offers all of the work that pregnancy help centers are doing, which is amazing. And then there was like fertility education, and then there was like a little community space with a cafe and a child watch and a chapel. And then in the corner, I remember there was full medical services to include birthing suites. And I had just been going through alongside my wife. Our first childbirth experience was, we were really excited and looking forward to it. And we were in a different town at the time, and we went to the local hospital and signed up for the classes, and we had a great OB. But in hindsight, it was just kind of part of that system. And she had her birth plan and was really hoping for things to go all natural. And long story short, she ended up with an unwanted and cesarean section. And for her, that was a very traumatic experience. And she couldn't even really talk about it for about a year. She really felt like she felt like she had failed as a mother, and this first and most important role as a mother was to give birth. And she and then here I am, and they're coming to me in the hospital and saying, okay, well, we need to go move on to this next step, because this last step that we tried to intervene is got us to this point. And now and here I am, not educated enough and not knowing how to advocate for my wife enough, and ultimately having to sign off on the cesarean section. And now I'm feeling guilty because it was, I was the one that had to give it, the okay. And so it was very difficult for both of us. And I felt like I failed her. And so fast forward a little bit to our second pregnancy. And we'd moved to Las Cruces at this point. And, I really felt like I can't put my wife through that again. I really felt that way. And so we, in our case, we looked for what are our other options, and we found a midwife who could do VBAC, vaginal birth after cesareans. And we had a great, wonderful experience. And that there was a lot of healing that came from that. And then we had another pregnancy loss, and then we've had other home births, and one home birth we had to transfer afterwards, for some health checkups. Others, we've had just beautiful, perfect ones. We had a whole gambit of each one, and of course is so unique and a wide variety of other experiences. To include our most recent birth experience, which just happened about 9 months ago. And for this one, we were about 2 weeks from our due date, and our midwife, we were planning a home birth. But she was so in tune to my wife's individualized specific health needs that she kind of proactively wanted to get another blood test done, and she ended up being right, and she caught my wife has the Rh negative factor, and she somehow during this pregnancy had become sensitized. So the midwife was worried this might cause for a difficult labor and delivery, and recommended that we actually go in. And this was a situation where she did recommend we go in and induce 2 weeks early. So my wife, was we because of the situation, this particular time around was a higher risk situation. So there's a time when you need that acute care from a hospital. Absolutely. So we were planning to go, but my wife also thought, let me just see if I can induce labor, get contractions going naturally, so when we go in, things flow smoother and they're not trying to force it, unnaturally. So she tried some nipple stimulation, labor induction, which worked very well, and got a very precipitous labor going quickly. And long story short, she's like, we're not going to make it to the hospital. So we called the midwife, and she's on her way over, but things are progressing so quickly that, long story short, I had the incredible and beautiful and intimate experience and honor of getting to deliver our own baby. Melissa helped a little. She was there, but no, it was amazing. She, and while we wouldn't have planned it that way, I also wouldn't change it for anything, because it was in 16 years of marriage now, it was the absolute most beautiful and intimate moment of our entire marriage. I've never seen her more empowered and beautiful, and just, she could conquer the world. in that moment.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I remember acutely that day because you were texting me and Leah like updates.
And
you were
you
like,
you
what's happening?
and you were also, it was right around the same time as your last baby, right?
Yes. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, how is she doing this on her own? Like, how is Mark catching a baby? It was a remarkable experience to witness via text message on the outside. I need to highlight many things because at time of this recording, we are in an election period. And there are a lot of things, there's a lot of noise on the internet. And I think a lot of people listening might resonate or can definitely I think what you said was helpful about this can't just be a ballot issue and that we need
Right.
to actually provide the care and the help. And it can't just be like part-time. I think that's so fascinating. So why is healthcare the response? Like why? Because there's many ways we could respond. We could respond with advocacy. We could respond with 365 days for life. You know what I mean? Like we could pray all day. We could. Why is healthcare such an important piece to this puzzle?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's critical because for one, well, let me start off by saying, we still, in our case, in the El Paso and New Mexico area, our guiding star is part of a larger coalition, and we have some other things that we do with mobile ultrasounds and prayer vigils and all that through other entities. But the healthcare is, I believe, the solution in the end game because abortion has come into our culture through the vehicle of healthcare. And that is how it's perceived. That's how it's marketed. That's how it's understood. That's how it's delivered. You go into a facility, you're talking to someone with a white coat who's got letters after their name, who is a medical authority. And increasingly, and this is what I always say, right? Justifiably so, the pro-life movement, we've been hyper focused on the 1/3 of pregnant women who are considered abortion vulnerable in a kind of a high risk pregnancy situation, and that's correct and justifiable. The one problem though is that while we've been really hyper focused there on these these vulnerable pregnancies, the abortion ideology has slowly been hijacking the entire gambit of women's healthcare, the entire spectrum, all the way from pre-puberty to post-menopause. That ideology has been kind of inserting themselves across the whole spectrum, so that by the time you get to that that pregnancy, that you go almost anywhere and you ask them about women's healthcare, and that phrase, the two words women's healthcare, is equated with contraception, abortion, and now often gender ideology. All three of those things, which are actually about suppressing and altering natural womanhood. And so if we want to be able to respond, we have to be able to provide full healthcare. And again, crisis pregnancy help services are needed and are incredible and miraculous. We have to have those intervention services. But if that's all we ever do is provide pregnancy tests, ultrasounds, and some parenting classes and things, we're never going to get ahead of this issue. We're always going to be kind of lagging behind in the shadows, in the wake of this larger issue. And so we have to be able to respond. And so in our case, we I was kind of going along this journey through the more of the ministry side, the prayer vigils, the outreach, and all that. But we knew that if there's a woman who feels she has no other option than abortion, we have to be able to offer her something better. And so, meanwhile, in El Paso, there was one of my dear friends, Nydia Correa, she was running a pregnancy center at the time called House of Hope, and she also had caught the bug and about this vision called Guiding Star. And so we ended up teaming up and working to announce the rebranding from House of Hope into Guiding Star El Paso, and we were able to go out to the local abortion center just 4 minutes away and start to let women know as they were going in through our separate organization that hey, just 4 minutes away there's a place, and here's what they can do for you, and they can actually walk with you so much that they had a nurse practitioner they were working with, volunteering at the time, and it was the realization that, okay, wait a minute, like somebody can actually continue to walk with me all throughout my pregnancy, that and beyond, and after the baby's born. We were starting to see women say, you know what, maybe I want to go check that out and see. And within a couple of years, we saw that facility shut down, and we saw the number of abortions from El Paso County residents plummeted. And the number of pregnancy help services that were being provided at Guiding Star in El Paso was skyrocketing. And you can actually overlay that chart and see, and this was all before any laws had changed in the state of Texas, or before Dobbs. And so I think that's a real testament to, it's a combination of being able to provide the service, but then educating women and letting them know that the service is there. And that's something that that I think the potential in the obligation we have in Guiding Star is, because, there's really, if you were to ask someone, what is the life affirming alternative to a brand like Planned Parenthood? And there's really nothing out there. There's a lot of organizations that are life affirming doing alternative work, but none of them have that national, presence where you could go to any city and say, where's your local Planned Parenthood? And people know what that is. They know what they provide. They know what to expect. There's a certain standard of care. And there's really nothing like that. And so, that's the opportunity and potential I see, while we only have right now, our 7 affiliates and locations, we're seeing a hunger and a need, and to truly be the alternative, then I never felt it was enough to ask a woman just to choose parenting, to choose life, and then say, okay, well, now you're kind of on your own to navigate this oftentimes very expensive, confusing, and frankly oftentimes scary childbirth experience. And to go in, and then having to refer to hospitals where you don't necessarily know, you can't guarantee someone is going to be get care that aligns with the values that are going to continue to affirm her in her pregnancy, that this is a good thing. This is what you were created to do. So many times the default is, as soon as the baby's born, it's like, okay, do you want to get sterilized? What kind of contraception are we going to do to make sure that this terrible thing never happens again? I mean, that's oftentimes the response, by kind of mainstream medicine. And so one of the things that we've been seeing is that as we look at this, I remember recently seeing a statistic that kind of blows people away, is that 62% of the women at the abortion facilities already have children. It's not a majority of young crisis pregnancies like people think. These are moms. And when you start talking to them, you oftentimes will realize that the experience is they have, and they don't even necessarily, this doesn't even necessarily register. They don't always realize this, but they've typically been through some kind of birth trauma, some kind of postpartum struggles, and whatever it was in their case, it's coming down to them just feeling like, I can't do that again. And in fact, we had a case that I had shared with you, Lisa, where a couple of years ago, there was a young woman that we were able to our coalition organization was able to reach out to this young woman who felt she had no choice but abortion, and connect her back to to the Guiding Star Center in town. And come to find out, she'd already had 2 abortions and a miscarriage, and this was her 4th pregnancy. And so we worked with her and helped her realize, this is a really beautiful thing. You were created to do this, and here's all the support and help for you. And she was like, you know what, I can do this. So she chose parenting. She fast forward a year passes. She comes in with this beautiful little boy with this dark brown hair and big brown eyes, beautiful little boy. But now she's pregnant again and so, and this time she has her husband with her. And as we're talking to her, they say, you know what, we can never have more than this one baby that we just had. And the husband also is saying, I can't put my wife through that again. And I can empathize with that, because I went through a similar birth experience with my wife and remember feeling I can't put her through that again. In their mind, however, they're saying, we're still paying off the medical bills. It was just a nightmare experience. And he's like, I love her too much to put her through that. And so we, despite having gone through this type of a decision with the last pregnancy, in their mind, having an abortion was a less traumatic option than going through a childbirth again. And so we've seen this a lot, where we've had clients that we've referred, that have chosen life, but ended up having such a traumatic childbirth experience that for subsequent pregnancies, they were back at the abortion facilities. They were not abortion vulnerable with their first pregnancy, but that first childbirth experience made them abortion vulnerable for their second. And so with this client, we started saying, well, look, since you were here last year, this is what we're doing now. And we're actually renovating downstairs to have full birthing suites. So we're working with a midwife who can help you out. We have lactation consultants who can make sure that, that those breastfeeding struggles that you went through, that you're going to be successful in being able to nourish your baby and bond with your baby. And we've got doulas to work with you on your birth plan. And their eyes are watering up as we're explaining this. And they're almost like, they almost can't believe that this, and they actually say like, they couldn't believe it. And when they finally said, if that's really available to us, then not only did they end up choosing life for this second baby that they're expecting, they said, if that's really available to us, we actually want to have 5 more babies. And that to me was the confirmation that, okay, I think we're on to something here, because here was a couple who said we could never have more than this one baby because of the experience of childbirth, right? To going to realizing that, in our hearts, they felt called to have a big family. And all it took for them to feel confident, for all we know, they could have had 5 more abortions, right? But all it took for them is to know that there's a place that actually is going to acknowledge and walk alongside you throughout not just the decision, but the entire experience. And if we're in the business of pro-life, a lot of people don't think of it in this way, but we're in the business of childbirth, because if there's a baby in that womb, that baby's got to come out, and it's going to be some form of a childbirth experience. It could be God willing, it's a joyful, empowering, beautiful childbirth experience. Maybe it's a traumatic childbirth experience. Maybe it's a really unfortunate pregnancy loss, experience where there's a miscarriage or stillbirth, but that's still a birth. It could be a very violent, and kind of premeditated childbirth, which is an abortion, where that baby is stillborn, but is not alive and doesn't survive the process. All of those are childbirths. And so if we're in the business of saying we don't feel that elective abortion is good for women, and we don't feel it's good for children, then we have to make sure that the alternative is good. And that's one thing that we have not been focused on, and as a larger movement. And so I think until the culture realizes that this is an incredible and empowering thing that is not to be feared, because how many, we've even had pro-life supporters who came in and walked through our birth center and then said, you know what, I don't yet have any children, and I never thought I could. And while I was completely against abortion, I've been so terrified of being pregnant and giving birth. Even my obstetricians, have just told me, you don't want to do that, just avoid it, and walking through our birth center and seeing the joy of motherhood and pregnancy and childbirth celebrated and revered. She was like, this is the first time in my life I've ever wanted to have a baby. And these are our own people, so if that's how she felt about pregnancy and childbirth, somebody who is neutral or has been, just completely influenced by culture, it's a no wonder that abortion seems like a legitimate option for so many women. So we've got to do so much more, and we've got to restore that reverence. And, I teach my boys that, when God created the world, he created all of creation. And then as his final act of creation, as his masterpiece, he creates woman. And he creates woman as this tabernacle for image bearers of God. This tabernacle through which he himself would enter into the world, right? And there's this beautiful imagery in traditional Catholic parishes, a lot of times the women will wear veils, or nuns, or will veil. And that comes from this idea that, in the tabernacle, in the Holy of Holies, the dwelling place of God on earth, the Ark of the Covenant was so sacred that even when it was empty, that just in and of itself, just as the reserved dwelling place of God, it was so sacred that it was veiled. Not because it was bad or negative, because it was holy. and we see that reverence, when we see women veil, that this is something that's reserved. This is something sacred. This is a good thing. This is, and there's this beautiful quote. Actually, I should have had this pulled up. Sorry, I got to find this on motherhood, because I this goes around a lot during Mother's Day, and I think this really captures the essence of what we need to work towards, to where this is the culture again. He says, the most important person on earth is a mother. She cannot claim the honor of having built Notre Dame Cathedral, but she need not. She has built something more magnificent than any cathedral, a dwelling place for an immortal soul, the tiny perfection of her baby's bodies. Even the angels have not been blessed with such a grace. They cannot share in God's creative miracle to bring new saints into heaven. Only a human mother can. Mothers are closer to God as the creator than any other creature. God joins forces with mothers in performing this act of creation. What on God's earth is more glorious than that, to be a mother? And that, I truly believe, I'll end with this thought, that I don't think that we're going to ever be able to see a reverence for life until we have a true reverence for the life bearer.
Oh, Mark Cavaliere. All right. So, that was good. Reverence for the life bearer. We are very grateful that you are a member of our national board. You obviously have such a passion and such a vision for what a future could look like, where women did not fear pregnancy or have more of a reverence for birth. If Guiding Star in the next 10 years, so I need you to put your visionary cap on, okay? Guiding Star, I don't know, we get blessed with like $100 million. Okay, I don't know, but we get blessed with like a bunch of money where we can kind of do anything. In 10 years, what does the world look like if Guiding Star is so successful, especially in the area of giving reverence for birth and reverence for the life bearer?
Yeah. Well, you're going to see, the vision is to have a Guiding Star Center ultimately in every city, just like a Planned Parenthood's, at least in every state. And this is a center where, women know that, and I love the multi-purpose behind the name, that, not only is this in honor of Our Lady Star of the Sea, but there's also this idea of kind of that guiding star that led, Mary while they were looking for a place to give birth. And so knowing that there's a place that they can go where they can receive care that actually speaks to their dignity as a woman, helps them understand that. But it's a place that they feel safe. They have their tribe there. In our center, you walk in, first thing you notice is there's, you smell fresh chocolate chip cookies baking, because we got a little oven in the corner making cookies for everyone who walks in the door. And then, you get signed in, and you're in a really nice, bright, natural environment. And then you are able to get your, from your initial pregnancy testing and, ultrasound to verify pregnancy, to be able to speak to a doula and begin your birth planning. Excuse me. To getting your prenatal care with a nurse practitioner, to start taking your classes for childbirth and lactation, even pre-pregnancy, of course, having fertility consultations to learn and understand how to work with your fertility, rather than just something that I don't understand and seems like a burden that we need to suppress, and then helping you prepare for childbirth and making sure in a non-judgmental way that you're empowered with all your options. And if you do feel comfortable and feel like you need to be in a hospital, well, here's the pros and cons of that, what you need to know, and we're going to be right alongside you with a doula as well. If you want a home birth, here's the pros and cons of that, and here's what this is going to look like. If just as important, a lot of times we talk about options counseling, being able to talk to them and empower them about making informed decisions and having informed consent. I think it's just as critical that women know their birthing options and really feel empowered, that they're not going into something blindsided and not knowing what to expect, whether the good and the bads, or saying, what, and we can take you downstairs and let's walk you through our birth center so you can see what this could look like if you choose to birth here. And then having our classroom where someone can come in and oftentimes they don't have the extended family and networks that we did 100 years ago. We've become so isolated in our modern culture that we have a child watch, so women can come in and have someone watch her other kids so that she can get her own healthcare appointments in, or take the class that she otherwise probably couldn't take. um, and um, and to celebrate that and make sure that she knows that having other kids is a good thing. They're not a burden, they're not a liability. Bring them with you. um, and so she can bring them in and check them into the child watch, and then get a cup of coffee at our new cafe that is about to launch in about a month. So you walk in the door and know that just like if somebody needs to get a couple hours of work done, or single mom needs to study, or take the class that we're offering, she can get her cup of coffee and have shop our little boutique and bookstore, and have a place that's gonna allow her that and not rush her or pressure her, because we understand. Or even if the thing she needs right now is because she's overwhelmed and exhausted as a single mom, she needs a nap. Come into our lactation room and we'll pull out the bed and you can take a couple hours of nap. And then knowing that what, I can go downstairs and I can have this beautiful like luxurious childbirth experience in these suites, and that there's fully trained licensed and accredited practitioners here who and in the rare event of a need that they anticipate we might need to transfer, that they're going to make that decision long before it becomes an emergency, and we're just a few minutes away from a hospital. And so we can make that if we need to. But in birth sitters, that's actually pretty rare, and uh, and that we have everything here, to have a fully medical but also homey and beautiful childbirth experience. Because some women this might be the only time in her life that she experiences childbirth, and we want to make sure it's the most beautiful and empowering uh, uh, experience possible, because so many women, not only their postpartum successes, but how they identify as a woman, as a successful mother, that sets her up for the rest of her motherhood, that sets her up for how she views future pregnancies. um, and having that where anybody can walk through and it just rocks their world, because this is like, wow, like women are that sacred and that special, that we're bringing all this together for them here. I believe that is step one towards working towards this culture. Is that it's one thing to be out there and talking about the beauty of womanhood, but and motherhood and childbirth, but it's still we're still working against a culture and a trend that oftentimes has only seen this depicted very scary as negative dramatic scenes in movies, because that makes for a better movie. um, but it doesn't depict the real life beauty, and so many women don't understand that. Talking to women who've gone through natural childbirth, who actually talk about it like it was a good thing and a good experience, and it was something that I can't wait to do again, and they're like, what, like that, that's something that we've lost over the last 100 years, and we need to um we really need to restore. And we've got to start with that place where we can take we can take someone who's a skeptic and walk them through and let them see it and absorb it and just understand it. And then once that place exists, then I can't wait until there is billboards everywhere and TV commercials, so that everybody knows that this is here for you. Just come on down, and we'd love to be able to walk alongside you and be a part of your journey.
I want to talk about the role of the media in all of this. You and I love to talk shop in terms of marketing and funnels and all the things. And we have some incredible players, let's call it, in the digital space. I think of the Rose with live action. There's many others who create content. Excuse me. They create content. Um, I'm really curious what you think the role of the internet and the ability for people to consume content on their cell phones so quickly. If I'm being really honest, in many of my bursts, if not all of them, I was pulling out my phone, texting people, live reporting. Oh my gosh, I'm 3 centimeters. Like, there's such a different ability now to consume consume content, obviously, but also create content that can blow up overnight sometimes. So, what do you think the role of media? What do you think the media plays in creating this future?
Well, for one, I think we're barely even starting to scratch the surface a little bit. You can just look at TikTok and, like, a large number of younger women who are coming to us looking for natural childbirth options and are starting to kind of question, what has become considered like the default normal childbirth experience at, more at acute care facilities like hospitals. There's kind of this already growing movement. They're kind of already doing it without us, where they're starting to create, create their own content and question things, and um, and it's a very much a authentic, individualized experience of women saying this was my experience. And that's the thing. We're shifting to where it can no longer be just the authorities saying this is the way that it is. It's now we need to empower women to share their stories. And it's very much, I think, a strain of, or a, like of the whole Me Too movement. Like, we need to listen. We really need to listen to women and their stories and what they're going through. And so one of the things we're currently doing is, we got it set up so that our ultrasound machines are part of this Tricify network, so that we can put in a woman's cell phone number and she immediately can get access to her ultrasound images and videos on her cell phone, so that she can immediately turn around and share those and start posting them on social media and sending them to her friends. And I mean, the nice little black and white pictures are nice. It's fun to hang that on a refrigerator. But in today's world, you need something digital that you can immediately start sharing and posting. And so just little things like that. And we haven't quite gotten this far yet, but having the option for women who do feel like that's an important part of their story is, what can we do as part of even the childbirth experience, that if they want to, they can make this something that, we've already talked about having birth photography as a readily available option. How cool can that be, that, you can no sooner, as soon as you're got your baby in your arms, you immediately got some really good pictures and videos you can start sharing. I mean, there's so many things we've got to explore, but I think that's part of it, because again, most women, there was a time where like breastfeeding and childbirth and pregnancy, nobody feared it because they were around it. In our extended families, you were around, your cousins and your aunts and mom, everybody, when they were giving birth and taking care of it. And now that's the thing. We've become so isolated that we're not around it anymore. And so we have to combat this media that depicts this as a burden and a scary thing, and treats fertility like it's a disease, to really just pumping out authentic user created content that's real. And I think that's the thing. People can sense now. I mean, everybody's seen, like, the reels where you were like, oh, this is so scripted that it's cringy, and I'm gonna move on. But when there's real emotion coming through, it's captivating. And so we need to empower women to be a voice, and give them a platform. And I think that's the other piece, is that, whereas I often will point to, again, like Planned Parenthood, they're not just a provider of certain services. They are also they're also a worldview. They're championing a worldview, and they're a voice for this worldview. And so it's not enough for us just to be a birth center and just to be a women's wellness center, and provide all these services. That's great, but we also then have to turn around and be a voice, and speak up, and speak for what this actually means and what is authentic, and give a platform for each woman to be able to share their story. Because it's those stories, when women say this is my birth story, those are the most powerful stories in the world. And
Mm.
that's what's going to change a culture, is giving women that platform to speak.
Yeah, we in March, as part of the Guiding Star Academy, which is a free resource that anybody can join. We hosted we were like, we're not going to record it. This is just going to be an opportunity for you to come and share your stories. We want to hear the good, the traumatic, all of it. And it was amazing. Like, people were so engaged and they wanted the recording. I can't believe how many women showed up live to share their stories. It was fascinating how just how interested people were in coming on and sharing. Mark, I could talk to you all day about a myriad. Like, I feel like, honestly, we could do a whole podcast on pro-life media. We could do a whole podcast of the role of men in this movement. Like, there's so many questions I could ask you. But is there anything else today that you wanted to mention that you haven't had a chance to share?
Well, the only other thing I'd mention, and maybe just because you just triggered it with the question of the role of men, we went to a birth center conference. I get the question asked a lot by, our kind of faith-based supporters who are like, well, what program do you have for men? Are you doing anything for fatherhood? And this is something that you see a lot of pregnancy help centers will have some kind of fatherhood program. And as of right now, we don't have a specific fatherhood program, but we're doing something I think that is really interesting. We were at a birth center conference about a year ago, and this was not a faith-based or life-affirming crowd. This was just birth centers. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, a lot of the ideologies that are, have kind of come to accept abortion and contraception and gender ideologies and stuff as an appropriate response to, in women's healthcare. They've kind of, that's kind of become very common in the natural birth world as it exists today. And so at this birth center conference, there was a lot of that abortion stuff everywhere. But what was interesting is at the end they had like a gala, and they had people sharing their testimonies, and they had a couple, a husband and wife, who stood up, and this was not a faith-based event. This was not a pro-life event, but they just had a couple stand up and just say, just tell us about your childbirth experience. And on their own, with no formal program or anything, this gentleman stood up and said, with our first childbirth experience, I didn't know what to do. And I went to the hospital. I kind of felt like I was in the way. I was just like, I didn't have a role there. This is not, it was very clear to me, like, that you're not supposed to be here. And then they went through the education in preparation for a childbirth experience at a birth center experience. And he said, it spoke to some instinct in me. And he said, going through this and being there for my wife as her coach, through her labor and delivery. He said, I discovered my God-given purpose as a husband and a father. And he said, in her moment, being the most vulnerable, I knew that I needed to be there. I knew what my role was as a husband. I knew I needed to protect her and defend her as a husband. I needed to be there for this child as the father. And there's something so innate and instinctive and intuitive about the childbirth experience between a husband and a wife. And this is something, praise be to God, I got to experience, as I mentioned, with our last childbirth. And so I truly believe, as I mentioned before, oftentimes, I was invited a while back to help facilitate a Rachel's Vineyard experience for women who've been harmed by abortion. And the common thread I was seeing is that so often women at those facilities, the abortion facilities, they've been used and abused by men who have not respected them, who have not revered them, who've objectified them, and who is failing to step up, kind of left them as spiritual widows and left those children as spiritual orphans. And that situation is not going to change until men have a different perspective of women. And by bringing those men alongside, though, and not making it, how many men just kind of like shy away from, or like, oh, like that's, childbirth, like, no, don't, I don't even want to be there. But there was a time where you had to, you had to be around this. And I think that's what we've pushed fathers, we've pushed husbands out of this experience, and they even if they want to, there's just, you're not able to have the same reverence from when you see that miracle of childbirth happening. And so we're now inviting and encouraging and almost, trying to require, in a sense, that no, if you are part of this baby, like, you're going to be part of the childbirth, and you need to come alongside and understand what she's going through, what she's going to go through, how to help her through these things. And it lights a fire in these guys, and they see their women as more beautiful and more powerful, more reverence. And when they really understand those superpowers of being able to carry and nurture and help to work with God to create new life, you look at her through a whole new lens, and her beauty, and just wow, and that's so the a Guiding Star Center is not just, while it's focused on the reverence of womanhood, it's very much bringing men in alongside her to absorb this reverence, and what does it mean to protect and defend that.
I have one more question. So
Sure.
you have got a birth center coming, you've got a cafe, you have so many other things that are part of the Southwest Coalition for Life, like Guiding Star is one component of a very large entity. What are you most proud of in the last 10 years?
Well, I mean, one thing I'm really humbled by is to see that over the last 10 years, as we've seen an increase in services and more women have become aware of these services and how we could walk alongside, seeing the God, through all of this fruit that God has made possible. We've seen 3 abortion facilities close locally. And I think that's a testament to just, when we provide services, and that's in spite of the laws and the politics. That was in the state of New Mexico. That has there was no legal reasons for those facilities to close. In Texas, that was in the El Paso side, that was all pre-Dobbs, pre-Texas Heartbeat Act. So I think that is something that's really amazing and humbling. And just seeing the community, more than anything, the pro-life community who has been standing up for the dignity of life, understanding and walking alongside and realizing, we have to really help moms be heroes, the heroes that God made them to be. And that means, if that means investing our time and our resources to make this type of facility possible, and it's really because of that. It's only because of the church community coming together and saying, we're going to put our money where our mouth is and walk alongside moms, because moms are worth it. And this is what we need. That's a very humbling and incredible thing that I think every community needs to come together and make possible in their town.
Moms are worth it. And this is what we want in every single town. Like, you are exactly right on. In every single city, a center where moms feel like they're worth it, where the community rallies around them. Mark Cavaliere, where can people go to learn more about Guiding Star Southwest and all of your incredible work?
Well, in our case, you can go to guidingstarsouthwest.org, and you can see everything that we're doing in the El Paso and Las Cruces area. And then unique only to our location too, to see kind of some of these other things that we're doing, including a maternity home. They can go to swc.inc. That's swc.inc. And they can see kind of how in our case, Guiding Stars part of this and a necessary and foundational part of this larger whole. But yeah, no, we're really grateful, because I truly believe that anything that this community is doing here, hopefully, God willing, can maybe help someday, be a foundation or a model or a blueprint that other communities can help replicate. So we're here to help.
We are grateful for you, Mark, both in your role as a board member as well as executive director of Guiding Star Southwest. You are so generous. You are always so incredibly generous with your time, and you are such a champion for women. So thank you. Everybody, thank you for tuning in to the Fearless Future podcast. We'll see you next time.